Good afternoon. Today's talk will be on Robert Southey's poem After Blenheim. After Blenheim by Robert Southey is usually considered as an anti-war poem that centers around one of the major battles of 18th century Europe, which is named the Battle of Blenheim. Written in 1796 in the form of a ballad, the poem offers deep insights on warfare in general and its consequences. The 1704 War of Spanish Succession, in which a coalition of forces, including the English, defeated the Franco-Bavarian army on the land of Blenheim, a small village in southern Germany, supplies the ingredients of the poem. Now, Robert Southey's poem is framed in the form of a conversation. Through a conversation between an old farmer, Caspar, and his grandchildren, Wilhelmine and Peterkin, the poet gradually reveals the scene of a former battlefield. One of the kids has found something large and round, which his grandfather explains is a skull, and one of the many to be found nearby. Similar instances run through the poem to support the main ideas, that is, tragic end of war and the vulnerability of human life. The poem makes us ponder on the purpose and result of the war or any war and even questions its validity. The war caused huge devastation and thousands of casualties, but old Caspar seems to have an unconcerned attitude towards this, as he claims that it was a famous victory and that things like that must be. His gruesome descriptions, followed by his casual sayings, create an effect of irony in the poem. It is ironic that it was a great war. It's equally ironic but that no one knows why it was a great war. The ballad is separated into 11 equal verses. The poet has followed the rhyming scheme A, B, C, B, D, D in all the stanzas but the last. The style that is used here is conversational between two people of different ages, the younger age representing vigor, restlessness, and curiosity, while the older age depicts experience, knowledge, and some form of wisdom. Now, the poem begins by picturizing a vivid scene of a summer evening. It is the time when most people return from work. The days are long and tiring in summer, and the sun sets late in the evening. An elderly farmer named Caspar sits in front of his cottage, watching his grandchildren, Wilhelmine and Peterkin, at play on the large green field. In the second stanza of the poem, we see that as Wilhelmine is playing, she saw that her brother Peterkin was rolling something large, smooth, and round, which he had found beside the river. Meanwhile, Caspar was sitting around observing his actions. Out of curiosity, Peterkin takes that something to his grandfather, wanting to know about it. In the third stanza, we find that elderly Caspar took that round thing from the boy, was left in anticipation of an answer as to what it was. After a brief look at it, the old man shook his head with a sigh and found it to be a skull of some poor fellow, which refers to a soldier who had died in the war, in the Battle of Blenheim, in that great victory. In the fourth stanza, we get to know that the Battle of Blenheim led to the death of thousands of soldiers whose corpses lie deep scattered in the field. Further, Caspar relates how he had found many such objects while plowing the fields. The great victory, quote unquote, refers to the triumph in the battle, which also happens to be an example of sheer patriotism. Caspar believed that the soldiers sacrificed their life for the country and did not die in vain. Their death served the purpose of victory in the battle. Stanza 5 says that hearing about the battle, the children were restless to know more about it. For them, the battle seemed to bring in some form of a thrill or excitement, along with some amount of amazement. Little Wilhelmine was so curious to know about the war and the reason behind it that it reflected in her eyes gleaming for a wonder to unfold. The poet reflects upon the zeal and enthusiasm associated with young age. The ability to question things is a peculiar quality of kids, which gradually fades away with the growing age. In stanza 6, we get to know that history books tell us that the British defeated the Franco-Bavarian army in the Battle of Blenheim. Caspar tries to answer the questions posed by his grandchildren by telling him or telling them this piece of information. The interesting point to note here is that he doesn't know the reason behind the war. In fact, he doesn't even try to find out. He remembers what everybody told him, namely the victory was famous, and he repeated it to himself as well as to the children again and again. That was the victory that was famous. In stanza 7, after Caspar recollects from the past some of the scenarios of the war, he begins by remembering his father who lived in a small village of Blenheim near the river. The French wreaked havoc in the village and burnt homes of several innocent people to the ground. Consequently, the villagers were forced to migrate in search of shelter. Young Caspar, along with his parents, fled to a different place but could not find a home because of the impending war. They had to roam about from one place to another, seeking rest. In stanza 8, we get to know the severity of the battle. Fire and sword are symbols of man's cruelty, and that is highlighted repeatedly by Robert Southey. They represent destruction, death, and horror. Wasted is an emotionally charged word again in the stanza. It conjures an image of a land violated of any use, purpose, and dignity. It shows both the futility of war and its power to destroy. The image of mother and baby killed in war here makes us see the battle as a catastrophe of both the present and the future. It powerfully evokes the death of innocence. Whether he believes it or not, Caspar has resigned to the inevitability of death. That's why he takes those killings casually and thinks it must be there at every such victory. Famous victory, quote unquote, is intentionally repeated by the poet to create a sense of irony. In the 9th stanza, the poet goes on to depict the terror of war. When the battle was over, thousands of dead bodies of soldiers lay rotting in the field. There are some sound effects in the stanza helped by the assonance of shocking and rotting and the alliteration in the first line. Combined, they give greater resonance to the horrendous images of death. The scene of rotting reduces dead men to carrion, an emotive, vivid word. It shows how war not only takes life away, but also dignity and human honor. In the 10th stanza, we get to learn that the Duke of Marlborough and Prince Eugene, representing Britain, won the battle which lasted for days. Here, Caspar praises the Duke and the Prince for having defeated the French and bringing glories to the nation. A confused Wilhelmine exclaimed that it was a wicked thing, that is, war generally was a wicked thing, and wondered how her grandpa could sing praises of such a bloody war again. Again, Caspar quotes that it was a famous victory. It is obvious that the old man was hiding all the destruction and agony caused by the war by repeating these two words. He seems to be afraid of breaking the romantic ideals of war, so carefully brought up in his mind. In stanza 11, we get to know that victory has many fathers, but defeat is an orphan. Staying true to these words, many people raise the Duke for having won the war, and Caspar recalls this with some delight. Peterkin then anticipated the very purpose of war and what it led to, but what good it is. But the old man did not have any answers to such questions. All he knew was that it was a famous victory. The poet again repeats the line, "But 'twas a famous victory." This line is an epitome of irony, as it were. The war was fought over a trivial dispute, but costed lives of thousands and thousands of soldiers. The only thing inevitable in the war is the destruction of life and property. Victory cannot bring back the lost lives which are lost during the war. This is a universal truth. Hence, the poet questions the purpose and need of war. Thus, the poem after Blenheim successfully conveys this message, and the message of Southey was that war is futile and should be avoided. Given the fact that this poem was written a few years after the revolution in France, the French Revolution of 1789, which most romantic poets eulogized or looked up to as some form of an epitome for a total liberation based on equality, it is significant that this poem may highlight at some level, or Robert Southey may have had a remembrance, as it were, of the senseless bloodletting that went into France in the aftermath of the French Revolution, when the main course of French Revolution apparently diverted towards needless violence than achieving the means for which the revolution was staged in the first place. The fact that this poem is so powerfully written with a statement against war or against any kind of meaningless violence, for example, may perhaps give us an idea that at this point in time when this poem was written, Robert Southey, like most of his romantic period contemporaries, did feel that the violence that was caused in the aftermath of the French Revolution in France was failing to fulfill the original purpose for which the revolution was staged in the first place. So that is something, that is some form of a connection that we can successfully establish with regard to this poem and Southey's attitude to the aftermath of the French Revolution. So that is all that I had to tell you with regard to this text. I hope you have understood the context and the conditions. The bottom line remains the same. This is one of the most famous poems in the pre-war English poetry, which carries such a powerful statement against warfare in general. Thank you.